You may have heard this story recently. There's a musician named John Roderick who has a 9-year-old daughter. Just a few weeks ago, his 9-year-old daughter asked him, "How do I use a can opener?" Well, the musician saw it as a teaching moment. He refused to show her how to do it and vowed that they wouldn't eat until she figured out how to use the can opener. It took his daughter 6 hours. And Roderick documented the entire event on Twitter. And during that time, he provided hints, he cajoled, he lectured, and he occasionally teased her. As you can imagine, online he was attacked and criticized. The Twitter mob was furious. And the typical sentiment was disgusted belief. Why not just tell your daughter how to use the can opener? Maybe the musician was on to something. When our children ask for help, what's the right mix of support and challenge? If you just tell them, aren't you undercutting motivation and the chance to build independence? Our rabbis asked the same question about something that we will all be doing 2 weeks from tonight, the Passover Seder. And there they insert 4 questions that spotlight specific rituals that we only do on Passover: eating matzah, the bitter herbs, dipping our food twice, and reclining. And the questions ask why we undertake each of these unusual behaviors on Seder night. Why are these 4 questions built into the Seder? Why any questions at all? On Passover, we commemorate the Exodus from Egypt. More than just remembering a story from the past, we reaffirm our unbroken tradition, linked generation by generation. And the passing down of the story of the Exodus from parent to child represents the forging of these links. In fact, we are specifically commanded to tell the story of the Exodus to our children, not just to recount it for ourselves. And our sages were aware that children don't always have the longest attention spans, all the more so in 2021. And the best way to grab a child's attention is to awaken their natural curiosity. The Seder, therefore, is designed to provoke our young to ask questions. That's why we do all these unusual things at the Seder. The rabbis of the Talmud were first and foremost educators, and they developed a Seder to provoke our young to ask questions. They knew questions had to be part of the Seder. Think about your best childhood teachers. My most memorable instructors were the ones whose engaging style encouraged me to ask questions. And they did it by stimulating my curiosity through their passion for creativity and innovation in the classroom. On Seder night, our aim as parents or grandparents, uncles or aunts, is the same. The Seder is filled with symbolic foods, elaborate rituals, and captivating words and songs to encourage even the youngest of children to be curious enough to ask. And with any good learning experience, the more questions the children ask, the better they'll understand the Passover story. Maimonides taught that we're literally commanded to introduce changes on Passover to encourage our children to ask questions. And if the standard efforts don't induce a question, new methods must be devised. The medieval commentator Rabbi would simply bring dessert to the table before the meal to prompt the child to ask the famous question, "Ma nishtana halayla hazeh?" Why is this night different from all other nights? In case our children fail to ask questions, if we haven't done enough different rituals and customs, if the meal isn't different enough, what better way to promote the asking of questions than to insert 4 questions into the Haggadah? Questions that point out some of the stranger and more bewildering Passover rituals. If the kids weren't curious beforehand, the hope is that by Manish Tanah, they'll be engaged by literally putting questions in their mouths. Yes, our children may not be fully old enough to comprehend the historical facts and intellectual issues that we explore on Passover. But when we give them the floor to voice questions, to express their curiosity, we allow them to personally experience the thrills and responsibilities of freedom. We start to make the story their own, so it becomes part of their Jewish DNA. Like it has for centuries, generation to generation, the number one goal of the Seder itself. After the 4 questions, we want our children asking questions all night. Because if we just offer explanations, if we just tell them, it's very rare that they'll actually learn what we're telling them. Indeed, children say, look at the surveys, they prefer learning by solving problems over listening to someone tell them how to do it. Challenges and problems have more potential to intrigue than explanations do. And satisfying curiosity brings pleasure. It activates the brain's reward system. Think about our own lives. We get a lot more satisfaction in the end figuring out something on our own. It may be challenging in the process, but by figuring out on our own, by asking questions, by seeking the answer, it becomes part of who we are. It not only satisfies our brain's desire for pleasure, but it becomes part of our DNA. The story is told of Isidore I. Rabbi, the Nobel laureate in physics decades ago, who was once asked, why did you become a scientist rather than a doctor or lawyer or businessman like the other Jewish immigrant kids in your neighborhood? He responded by saying, my mother made me a scientist without ever intending it. Every other Jewish mother in Brooklyn would ask her child after school, did you learn anything today? But not my mother. She always asked me a different question. When I came home from school, she would say, Izzy, did you ask a good question today? And that difference, asking good questions, made me become a scientist. Seder night is our time to be creative. And there's no right way to do it. As I prepare for another Seder as a father, let me share with you some entertaining and innovative techniques that we've used over the years to arouse our children's curiosity. First and foremost, we buried that old Maxwell House Haggadah years ago. And if you haven't yet, I encourage you to do it. Don't throw it away, bury it, but find a better Haggadah. We are so blessed in this day and age. There are dozens and dozens of illustrative Haggadot that tell the story in such a better way. We have them in our gift shop. You can find them online. If you need recommendations, just email me or Rabbi Ford or any of our clergy, and we're happy to share with you our recommendations. Because by having, first and foremost, a good Haggadah, you won't be confined to just reading the Haggadah. Is there anything more boring than just reading English paragraph after English paragraph, especially out of a Haggadah that has no illustrations, no interesting stories, no captivating explanations? Secondly, I encourage all of our children to share their favorite Jewish stories and interpretations about what does it actually mean to be free today in America as a Jew. What does it mean to be free from our iPhones and iPads? What does it mean to be free from our ever-relenting pressures we all feel from our careers? What does it mean to be free today as we emerge from this pandemic? We also supply our children with Passover arts and crafts, challenging them in Passover quiz games, and perform for them special Passover magic tricks. I'm still working on that one to make the wine in Elijah's cup disappear. And to top it off, we throw plastic frogs at each other during the recitation of the plagues. We follow the Moroccan custom of passing matzot over everyone's head while chanting Halach Ma'anya. And we practice the Afghani tradition of hitting each other with green onion stalks during Dayenu. As you can see, there are countless ways to add those little peculiarities that certainly make the Seder night unique. And there's no right way to do it, but there is a righteous goal: to fulfill the sacred and eternal Jewish pledge. And you shall tell your child on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I went free from Egypt. And the best way to tell our children about the experiences of our people is to stimulate their questions by being flexible, inventive, and imaginative teachers, like the ones we fondly remember from our childhood. Musician John Roderick was onto something. Maybe he didn't deserve his Twitter beating. Yes, he probably went a little too far. 6 hours is a long time. But he was doing something, his goal was right. He was trying to get his daughter to ask questions and learn by taking on something herself, so that learning would become part of her. And the same is true for us, to pass on those religious customs, those family traditions, and those ancient stories. Shabbat shalom, everyone.